Hello there guys. In this video we're going to be looking at a two-handed setup, two-handed weapon setup, sorry, inside of Motionbuilder. Now this kind of builds on from a weapon setup video I did in Maya. I also talked about constraints in Maya. This is essentially the final part of that sequence, but I'm going to finish it in Motionbuilder so that you can get used to how to animate in Motionbuilder, as well as looking at how constraints work in Motionbuilder. So it's a similar process, but I thought I'd do it in Motionbuilder because it's a good way to whet your appetite for Motionbuilder. So first off, I loaded in our chap from last time. He is now fully characterized and ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a sword that I've already set up. It's got joints in it just so that when it goes into game engine, the game engine can read the joint animation rather than the stuff from the mesh. It's just easier for game engines. And I'm going to attach the sword to his right hand, his dominant hand, and I'm going to make the left hand follow. That means the left hand, because it's following, it needs to be in IK. It absolutely necessarily needs to be in IK mode. So if I select this this left wrist effector here, you'll see over on the character window, we've got IK blend T and R. That's translate and rotate. So currently they're on 0, which means FK. If I put them over to 100%, that means they're in IK. Another way to do that is with anything selected, you have options down in your key controls here, and we have FK and IK. So I could just click IK and you see it automatically switches it over to IK mode and sets a key. So I'm just going to leave that like that. I need that in IK mode, and this right arm I'm going to keep in FK. FK generally is a better way of animating arms because you can get cleaner arcs, but for the left hand, like I said, because it's following, it necessarily needs to be in IK. So I'm going to bring in my sword, if I can remember where I've put it. Base meshes, I believe. Assets. Oh, I believe that's the guy there. Although, yeah, we'll go with it. Let's see what happens. And we want to merge. We don't need animation, so we bring in a sword, and oh, that's big. Pretty certain I've made a better version of this sword, so I'm gonna delete this out and just find the one that I actually want. Now, scenes might make sense. Objects, ninja sword. Merge, no animation. There he is. Much better. And we've got textures on it as well. Now, obviously, a futuristic cyber ninja sword doesn't really fit our biker guy, but that's what we've got, and that's what we're working with. So don't stress about it. Okay, so I'm just gonna chuck this sword up roughly where I'd like it to be, and I think I'm going to have that on his back so that you can draw it from his back. I'm just going to switch out of X-ray mode. It's making it hard to see what's going on. Okay, so I'll just roughly position it. When he picks up this sword, I want the blade to be pointing that way. That should work with the way he picks it up and face the right way when he puts it in his hand. Yep, I'll go back into X-ray mode. So our sword is in position. Now I'm going to have to animate our guy into some kind of withdrawing kind of pose. So I think first off I'm going to put it into auto key. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually pose him in a bit more of a relaxed pose here. Let's just chuck his arms down by his side. Posing is generally a lot faster in IK, but kind of less precise, so there's benefits of working in both. Okay, that will do for his standard default pose. We'll just go with that. And I'll just check this sword position before I move on. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay. So I'm not gonna bother about the timing of the animation. I'm just gonna move it to like frame 8. Maybe let's round it off, make it 10. So at frame 10, I'm gonna have his right arm come up and grab this sword. So I'll do as quick as I can. I'm not gonna finesse anything. I just want to give you an idea of what we need to do here rather than making something beautiful. Using the roll bones to rotate his arms around further rather than just using the shoulder joint. Okay, getting there, getting there. Let's bring his clavicle back a little bit. Oh, he's close. Okay, it looks a little bit uncomfortable for the poor fella. I think maybe I could lean that sword forward just a little bit. So I'm going to grab our sword and just going to lean it forward just a little bit. And then reposition him. Something like that. Okay. Almost there. Okay, it's a bit uncomfortable for his poor arm there. Oh. I'm just going to go with it. I'm not too fussed about it looking beautiful right now. Okay, something like that. Yeah. Okay, so there's his arm going up into position. Fine. And I'll pull it at frame, let's call it frame 18. We'll have his arms go out in front as though he's holding the sword. I'll just rough it in for now. Oh, dear me. Didn't mean that. I'm just going to call it there. Okay. So it picks it up, comes out front. Okay, so now we need to start working with our constraints. So we need to go over to our templates folder, and in here we have something, a folder called constraints, and we're going to use the standard parent-child. You may be familiar with a similar system inside of Maya. So I'm going to bring this in. I can either drag this and drop it onto something, or I can just drag it into the scene. If I do, it exists, but it's not attached to anything. You see constrained object and source parent are both empty. So if I find the things I want to constrain, so let's just grab the top handle of our sword, and we're going to call that the thing that's going to be constrained. I'm just going to drag it into that, and then we want that to be constrained to our wrist. So I select my wrist, and now I'll locate it in my navigator. There it is there, and drag that onto our source. Okay, so if I activate this, there's a possibility it might snap out of position. But if I click snap, it will automatically activate it and key it and keep it in the right position. So click snap, you see it becomes active, and there was no jump. So now when I move the arm, it should follow. I'm just going to key that there. So at frame 10 we have our constraint keyed. At frame 9 we don't want it to be keyed, so I'm going to take the weight off down to 0 and key that. So up until frame 10 nothing happens. Frame 10 our sword moves. Perfect. So there is a constraint working how we want it. Okay, if we want to edit our constraints, we'll see underneath our sword, which is the thing which has the constraint attached to it, we have parent-child here. I'm going to rename it just so I don't get confused, and this will be sword right hand, we'll call it. Okay, so that's working as we want it. Lovely. I should also put a constraint on the sword so that it follows the body before then. To do that, I won't attach the constraint to the same place, which is the top level here. I can attach it to one of these auxiliary controllers that I've got set up. They control the sword, but they're underneath the top one. So I'll do that quickly and show you what I mean. So let's go. I'm going to select our constraint and have a look on the dope sheet. The dope sheet will show me where our keys are. So 9 and 10. Okay. So let's go to frame 9. Frame 9. And we're going to add in another parent-child constraint. Here it is here. I'm going to rename this one sword body. Okay, so now we need to tell it what is constrained and what is the parent. So again we want the sword constrained, but this time instead of the top level controller we'll do the one directly underneath it. So constrained object is the hand sword group, and this time we want the chest to be the controller. So let's find our chest. There you are there. Drag that guy in. Okay, same thing again. I'm going to click snap. That activates it, and I'm going to set a key on frame 9. So frame 9, we want it active. Frame 10, we want it off. So hopefully, yep, our initial constraint is still working fine. And I'm just going to check by moving the body. Oh yeah, and the sword is constrained to the body before that point. Wonderful. In light of that, I might edit this this grab pose. It's a little bit static. I'm going to make him rotate round a little bit in order to grab that. So rotate round and bend a little bit. So just a tiny little, very small adjustment. Might make him bend a little bit more. Okay. So there's our guy reaching and grabbing, and he pulls it out in front. So that is the easy part. Now we need to deal with making our left hand follow this sword. At this point I can also adjust the position a little bit because the hands don't really match up. I haven't done a great job of positioning that sword in his hand, but we can deal with that another day. Oh god, I've done a really bad job of that. I might have to edit that ever so slightly. No, I'll come back and do that later. For now, it looks beautiful. Okay, so let's change the position of this left hand and make it actually fit a little bit better. Grab our roll bones here and just roll that hand around a little bit. Getting there. Okay, without adjusting the fingers and stuff, I'm gonna call it there and just say no, that elbow position's horrendous. That simply will not stand. Excuse me, I'm being a little bit too anal about this. I'm just going to chuck it in there, okay? And we'll just ignore the fact that it's a fairly terrible position. So there's our guy holding his sword. Yeah, he looks like a valiant hero, definitely. Okay, I am going to just change this wrist. There we go. That makes it just that little bit more palatable. Okay, so we have our guy pulling his sword out and putting it in position. Now we need to deal with constraining that left hand to the sword. To do this, we will make a constraint, but before we do that, we need to create what's called an auxiliary effector. Now what this is an extra box on top of the wrist, which will control the wrist just like the wrist does, but it's in the hierarchy, it's just slightly above the wrist controller. And because it's not directly linked to the bones, we can attach constraints to it and it doesn't mess up our entire hierarchy. So to create one, if I select our left wrist, so just select it either here or in your viewer, and right click, and we've got these options here, auxiliary pivot or effector. We want the effector. The pivot's kind of like a lightweight cut down version of the effector. So I'll create that guy, and there he is. Okay, that position's not good for me, so I'm going to change into pivot mode. There we go. And now you'll notice my move tool doesn't have the ends, it doesn't have the manipulators. That's just a visual thing to show you that we're in pivot mode. Without being too fancy, the position's a bit lame. I'm going to just roughly position it. Okay, so there's our guy in position. Click back to model mode so that we've got our manipulators, and now we're ready to apply another constraint. So I'm going to bring this guy in, and there we go, we have him selected. Rename this guy, let's call him left hand swordy. He's calling him, changing the naming convention slightly different because it's kind of a different setup, so I don't need to necessarily, but I just do it because of my scatterbrain. Okay, so we need to constrain our hand to our sword. So let's select our wrist effector. That's that guy. And let's locate him here. There he is. So he is going to be the object that's constrained. So chuck him in here. He is the child. And he's going to be constrained by the sword. And now I want him to rotate from this location he's at. So my sword, inbuilt in it, has various different controls. Like this sword offset. And that sword offset will follow everything above it. But it's in the perfect location. So I'm gonna call that one as being the thing that drives our hand. So right, I've chucked that guy in there, and I haven't activated it yet. So if I click on my snap, no jumping, everything good, click key, I'll go forward 1 frame and put the weight to 0 and key it again, and now let's see if this is working. Okay, so fingers crossed, hold your breath. Withdraw is fine, hands go up. Okay, everything so far is looking good. Now the acid test. Let's move our hand and see if everything follows. Okay, here comes the elbow movement. Whee! The offset's a little bit wonky. But we now have a guy who is wielding a totally out of place, out of character ninja sword. Wonderful. I'm going to call it there for this video. Next video we'll look at tidying it up and making this maybe a little bit more neat. Cool. Take care.